Dad.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Nathan, didn't your dad just buy you those shoes?
Yeah, my dad says I'm tough on shoes. I wore these out in about a month.
Well, I wore out a pair of jeans in 2 weeks.
Oh yeah? I could run a grandma grandpa in an hour.
What's up, everybody? In this video I'm going to be kind of doing a recap of the Project Failblazer. If you've been following my channel, you know that we bought a 2004 Trailblazer for parts. It had a blown engine, had relatively new front end parts on it, and I spent a couple weeks just going at this thing and rebuilding the front end. Well, one of my favorite things about the repairs on this vehicle was just replacing the brakes. This Trailblazer has some of the best brakes I've ever had on any vehicle that I've ever owned. Brakes work.
Jeez.
And so I got all that stuff done before we went out of state visiting some family. The last video I left off with basically completing the repairs, but I had a few days before we left for our trip to drive the vehicle and just kind of iron out any problems it may have. I had a couple of small little issues that I needed to fix. One, there was still a rattle in the front end that I thought for sure would have gone away, and it ended up being something rather kind of embarrassingly simple. There was also another issue. For some reason, the analog brakes would come on whenever I was coming to a stop. Under 5 miles an hour, the analog brakes would kick on, but that ended up being a pretty simple fix as well. So a couple of things that I needed to do before we left and got those taken care of, so then we took off for our trip. So we take off for Atlanta, and it was quite literally a smooth ride down and back. We had absolutely no issues with the Trailblazer at all. I thank the Lord for that. The front end held up nicely. No squeaks, no moans and groans. It drove quiet, it drove smooth, it drove straight, doesn't pull left or right. Really drove like a totally new vehicle. Kept ourselves entertained. I plugged my phone into the jack on this aftermarket stereo so you can play the phone through the speakers of your vehicle. And so what I ended up doing was dropping the center console thing in the ceiling, sticking my phone up there, put the cord into the radio, and we were able to watch some video and stuff on my phone while we drove. So that was a lot of fun. We stopped in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and had some fun with just my family. We ended up going to Lookout Mountain and checked out Ruby Falls. I had lived in Chattanooga for a short time in my life and had never been to Ruby Falls. If you've never been, it's really cool. It's a nice long cave that goes into Lookout Mountain. I think you end up going about 1,000 feet underneath the mountain. You take an elevator, you go down into the cave. We're going really far underground, and then we start on the tour and we stop in this kind of a narrow spot. They had a TV screen and they were kind of showing you basically the origin story. While I was standing there, it just started getting to me. I think I was starting to have a small panic attack, so I had to just suck it up and gut it out for my daughter because she was kind of freaking out a little bit, and my wife was a real trooper. She was right there with her and calming her down, and there's nothing to be afraid of. In the meantime, in my insides, I'm getting ready to puke, The falls were magnificent, and I took some pictures, and really the pictures don't really give it much justice. It was really magnificent. It was kind of overwhelming to kind of take that in, but it was really awesome. I was driving our Trailblazer down the mountain. I wasn't really paying attention, and I started kind of picking up speed going down the mountain, kind of laying on the brakes a little bit. And by the time we got to the bottom of the mountain, my daughter was in the back. She goes, "What is that smell?" And I look in my rearview mirror, and the whole rear end was just engulfed in smoke. I had absolutely lit up those rear brakes.
Look what you did, you little jerk.
And thankfully, there wasn't any damage to the brake pads, and the rotor didn't warp or anything. Kind of an embarrassing moment on my part to not be paying attention and just kind of fry the rear brakes. One of my favorite treats in Chattanooga when we lived there was going to a Po Folks, which was a kind of like a Cracker Barrel. I don't even know if they're even still in business. but back in the early 80s, it was all about the Po folks. One of my favorite things was they sold moon pies. If you don't know what they are, look them up. They're really good. We stopped at the official Moon Pie General Store in downtown Chattanooga, and we were able to get all the different kinds of flavors of moon pies that they have. So it was definitely a treat to be able to go to that general store. We were able to visit my sister and her family. She's got an in-ground pool. My son really enjoyed jumping into the pool through some inner tubes and stuff. So cue the dramatic slow motion footage. Trip, and my dad took myself and my son to the College Football Hall of Fame in Atlanta. That was really a neat experience. When you first walk in, they have this wall of helmets. To see this wall, kind of like a kid in a candy store, truthfully. When you first walked in, you would log into this computer, type in your information, and select your favorite college football team. So you had this thing hanging around your neck, and every time you go past a display, your name would show up on the screen, and then all the stats and information and the history of your favorite team was on display. Then they have an activity zone where you can go in and they have a full field goal uprights, and you could kick a field goal yourself. It was like a 20-some yard field goal. It was pretty cool. They had some throwing stations where you could throw at targets. That was a lot of fun, but my favorite part was the stage where you could kind of high step through some ropes, and then you would go through a slalom of pads, and whenever you broke past that last pad, one of the employees there would toss a football to you. If I turn the corner there on that last pad and I look up and I realize the ball's sailing a little further than right at me. So I thought, if I'm gonna get this ball, I'm gonna have to completely sell out and dive for it. And that's exactly what I did. Still got it. If you're gonna go all out, you know what I mean? So then my dad tried it, and kind of the same situation for him. The ball's a little bit out in front, so he sold out for it too. Made a nice diving catch. You always got to show the ball to the crowd. And then my son gave it a try, and he pulled in a nice catch too. So. All right, so I've actually been back from our trip for a few weeks now, and I've been driving the Trailblazer quite a bit, and we've had a few issues since we've been back. I certainly don't call this truck a Failblazer for nothing. The passenger side window, I'm sitting down at the bottom of my driveway. Kids were in the car waiting on the bus to show up, and I had rolled down the passenger side window, let a little fresh air in, and it started to rain, so I went to roll the window back up and it wouldn't go up. The window motor went out, so I had to replace that. The front end started to develop a clunking noise whenever I go over bumps, so that was extremely frustrating because, you know, I just had replaced all that stuff, so I thought, what in the world could it possibly be? And it ended up being the end links on the front sway bar. Apparently I didn't tighten them down tight enough, or maybe they loosened up a little bit, but every time you'd hit a bump, they would really clunk. The driver's side one was making a little bit of noise, enough to be annoying, and then the passenger side, it got real loose on me, and it sounded like stuff was falling apart on the front end. I mean, it was really clanking. I was able to get that resolved as well, tighten that bolt down, even put some thread locker on it. Hopefully that's not going to back off. I just think that front end sway bar is kind of a poor design. It seems like it's prone to fail. That's just my opinion. So anyway, I got those two front sway bar end links tightened down. I've not had any more noise from that, but I think the bushings that hold the sway bar on the front side of the frame, I think the bushings are pretty worn out there. So this thing still does make a little bit of thumping noise whenever I go over bumps. That's been kind of an issue. So anyway, when I got back from the trip, one of the first things that happened to this thing was the little secondary muffler, the little resonator thing on the end of the Trailblazer, rusted completely off. I was walking up to the house and I happened to see that the muffler was dangling, and I just kind of shook it a little bit and it just fell off right in my hand. So that secondary muffler is gone now. One of the major problems that I had since we've been back is there are two power steering lines. There's a high pressure line and a low pressure line that go over the driver's side wheel well on the inside of the vehicle. both lines had rusted through and I was leaking power steering fluid everywhere. So I had to replace those lines. I was able to get those lines off the parts truck and I got the whole thing replaced. I tried to bleed it, racking the steering back and forth and trying to get the air out of it, but for some reason, power steering pump is really kind of whining. When I first done the steering rack, I had unplugged everything and had to refill everything with power steering fluid and button everything back up. Power steering pump didn't whine at all. But since I replaced those two lines, I've had an issue with the power steering pump kind of whining. So that's really bugging me. And I thought I've done enough to get it to bleed. I don't know what's going on. If you guys have any tips or anything. I did put in some Lucas Oil power steering additive that said it helped reduce whine, and that certainly did help a lot. But I still have a little bit of a whine, so I'm wondering if the power steering pump's starting to go out. Who knows? I also had a really interesting problem with the Trailblazer. For some reason, I would turn the key and I didn't have anything. The dash would kind of blink a little bit. I couldn't pull the car into gear, so I was beginning to think there may have been a problem with my ignition switch. So I popped the hood on this thing and I started trying to jump a few things in the fuse box, seeing if I can get the truck to crank. I thought maybe I could put a voltage tester on the steering column wires and see if I could get some signal and stuff there. I have powered everything, still just couldn't get it to crank. I tried jumping it and stuff and I couldn't figure it out. It ended up being it was a dead battery. It ended up just being a stinking dead battery. I thought for sure I tore into the steering column. It was a dead battery. I took the battery out, I charged it on a charger, put it in, fired right up, had no issues since. And then one of the last things I've kind of noticed is the rear air works, but it's intermittent. I think the switch on my console might be a little loose. I know the little connector was a little loose when I was putting the console back together. It may have worked itself a little bit loose, or I've got a loose wire in the back or something underneath that back panel where the fan blower is. I don't know. But it'll kick on, it'll stay on for a few seconds, and then it kicks right back off. I don't know what's going on with it. But those are about the 5 or 6 things that I've had wrong with this thing ever since I've come back from our trip. So what's next for the Failblazer? Well, I don't think the truck really runs as well as it could. I think it might be needing a tune-up. I went ahead and pulled the coil off one of the spark plugs, and I noticed that there was oil down in the cavity, so I'm going to have a valve cover gasket repair in my future. I think I'm going to replace the throttle body with the one off of the parts truck, and the coils and spark plugs on the parts truck look new, so I'm going to just replace all those onto this thing. And then something fun I plan on doing in the future is I've got those cherry bomb mufflers that I put on my Silverado, my Yukon, and my Camaro. My thought is to do the same to the Trailblazer, but I'll get to that whenever I can. I'm awfully busy, but that is something that I do want to do to this Trailblazer. Anyway, that's how the Trailblazer's running. Appreciate you guys watching and following this process, leaving comments and giving the videos thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I've got a lot of repair videos. I like to do some things that are fun as well. And as always, God bless. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.